On Saturday morning, September 16, 1922, a young couple strolling on a lover's lane on the outskirts of New Brunswick, New Jersey, discovered two bodies. A woman's head lay on a man's right arm, her hand on his knee, a scarf over her throat. The man's business card leaned against his foot. Scattered over the bodies were pieces of paper. The man was the Reverend Edward W. Hall, rector of the Episcopal Church of St. John the Evangelist. Handsome and popular, he had some 11 years earlier, at the age of 30, married 37-year-old Frances Noel Stevens, daughter of a well-to-do New Brunswick family. It was known almost instantly who the murdered woman was, for it was common knowledge that Reverend Hall was deeply involved with a member of the St. John's Choir, Eleanor Mills. Her quiet and unambitious husband James served as sexton of the church. The country was titillated when the newspapers, hot on the trail of a story of torrid love, revealed that the papers scattered over the bodies were love letters. The autopsies reported that the minister had been shot once and the 32-year-old choir singer 3 times, both in the head. Her throat had been slit from ear to ear and her voice box nearly removed. Eleanor Mills was wearing a yellow dress with red polka dots, black silk stockings, and brown shoes. She had worn a blue velvet hat that was on the ground close to her body, and her brown silk scarf was wrapped around her throat. Her arm had a bruise and there was a tiny cut on her lip. Her left hand had been positioned, after death, to touch the man's right thigh. During the 1926 autopsy, it was discovered that her tongue had been cut out. Edward Wheeler Hall was found with his right arm positioned, after death, to touch the woman's neck. His hat covered his face, which concealed the .32 caliber gunshot wound to his head. He wore a pair of glasses. There was a small bruise on the tip of his ear and abrasions were found on his left little finger and right index finger. A wound was found 5 inches below his kneecap on the calf of his right leg. His watch was missing and there were coins in his pocket. From the start, the investigation was a mess. Souvenir hunters rendered the crime scene useless by handling evidence, trampling underbrush, and stripping the crab apple tree of its bark, then pulling it up by the roots. Reporters arrived on the scene before the bodies had been taken away and tramped around the area, contaminating the crime scene of possible clues. The card at Hall's feet was passed around to reporters, police, and curious onlookers, making any fingerprint evidence permanently obscured. Almost immediately, the police suspected the spouses of the victims. Both claimed to have spent the evening at their homes. When their spouses had not returned home, they had gone out in search of them, but had been unsuccessful and returned home. Eventually, the police would also suspect 2 of Mrs. Hall's brothers. At the end of October, a 50-year-old widow named Jane Gibson, who raised hogs near the murder site, disclosed that she had mounted a mule on the night of September 14 to follow a suspected thief. In the Lover's Lane, she had seen 2 men and 2 women silhouetted against the night sky, then heard screams and shots and the shouted name Henry. Dubbing her the Pig Woman, the press thronged Gibson's dilapidated living room. She told them she had always wanted to talk to the police, but they wouldn't listen. The Pig Woman's notoriety increased more and more as the trial went on. One reason for this was that she was dying of cancer at the time, and gave her testimony from a hospital bed, which was brought to the courthouse each day by ambulance and placed in the courtroom. Another reason for her fame was the outcry against her testimony. Neighbors of the Pig Woman went on the stand and swore that she was the biggest liar they had ever met. 4 years after the murder, the Pig Woman's recollections of the crime had somehow become much more detailed than they had been at the time of the original investigation. Conveniently, her testimony began to sound more and more like the scenarios of the crime put forth by the tabloid newspapers and by the prosecution. The Pig Woman's own mother attended the trial every day, where the 76-year-old woman would sit in the first row, directly in front of the iron hospital bed her daughter was occupying, and mutter the words, "She's a liar." Mrs. Hall, her brothers, and their cousin were all ultimately found not guilty of murder, due largely to the shaky foundation of the Pig Woman's testimony, on which the prosecution had built its case. The pig woman herself died shortly thereafter, and the Hall Mills murder case has remained unsolved since 1922. Many theories of what happened that night would be postulated. Some felt that Mrs. Hall and her brothers had committed the killings, but had gone free due to a flimsy prosecution case. Others believed that they had killed off Reverend Hall and Mrs. Mills as a discouragement for immorality in general. Other theories claimed the killers were local teenagers, Mrs. Mills' husband, or a hired assassin. At the trial, the defense even proposed that the pig lady did it.